Hey friends, welcome back to the show. It's Anna Gibbs with another episode of Monday Morning Mojo, and I just want to jump right in and have this conversation with you today. And I guess I am going to start with a question. And the question that I want to ask you today is this: when was the last time you felt genuinely rested? Not just caught up on sleep, not just less behind, but actually rested, present, clear, like yourself. I ask because one of the things that I believe is happening for a lot of us is this sense of feeling exhausted. And I hear this a lot, most often from women who are leading, building, showing up every day with everything they have. And they are giving 100%. And they're also feeling exhausted, and they're feeling really physically and mentally tired, and maybe not even understanding fully why. And so this is what I want to talk about today. And I want to really just open this up in an honest way, in a supportive way. I don't want to add anything more to your plate, but I think that when we get into this conversation, you're going to find some surprises along the way, because most of the time, the real reason why we're tired has very little to do with how busy we are. I think that I can say this with clarity and honesty because I found myself there too. Just a short while ago, a couple of years ago, I found myself in a season of my career that I couldn't really make a lot of sense of. I was doing everything the way I'd always done it. I was showing up, I was leading, problem solving, carrying responsibility in a lot of the same ways I always did. And I was good at it. And I had built a career on being good at it. But something had shifted, and during this time, I was working harder, and yet I was feeling less effective. And I was bringing my full self and still coming up empty on some days. And no matter how much I pushed, the results and the energy and the sense of momentum just weren't always there. And look, it's not always easy to talk about. It certainly wasn't easy for me to talk about it then. And yet I want to have this conversation with more and more of you because I know I'm not alone in this. Now, at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I kept asking myself, what is wrong with me? And that was not the question, honestly, to ask, because really there was nothing wrong with me. I had simply stopped checking in with myself. And I will tell you that what was going on for me was that I had stopped making myself a priority. Now, the cues were there in my body, in my energy, in my thoughts, long before I had words for them. But like a lot of you, I think I grew up in a business world and at a time maybe where I was even trained to just move forward, not always needed to go inward, just put your head down, do the work, figure it out, solve the problem, and just keep moving, right? Moving to endure. And look, there are times when that strategy is helpful and it works. But then there are times when we have to be honest about taking a time to pause and examine. And so I was pushing and I was moving forward more than I was pausing and examining. That was true for me. And that experience and a lot of things that came around that time is actually what led me to write my book, Getting Back to You, because I needed to understand what had happened. And what I found both in my own journey and in the work I do now with women every day is that most of us are exhausted, not because we're doing too much, but because we're carrying things we were never meant to carry for so long. And here's what I want you to understand, right? This didn't happen because you make bad choices. It's not happening because you're not a good leader. It has nothing to do with your capability. Sometimes I think it has everything to do with how much you care. It's just that somewhere along the way, for a lot of us, for most of us who are high achieving women, we get this message that is not always spoken as loud as it could be. It's felt, but it's not always something we hear. And we receive this message somehow in our career that being valuable means being useful, that the more dependable you are, the more valuable you are, the more available you are, the better leader you are, that you are someone who should feel grateful for all the opportunities, and therefore, if you're the one who can always handle it, that you should wear that with a badge of honor. And I believe that so much of this is wonderful and has built our careers, and it's not wrong in itself. The challenge and the problem comes in when we stop managing it. Because we are capable, and because we are so good at handling stress and crisis and challenges and multiple priorities and leading people, the world around us comes to understand that. They come to depend on it. And so whether we're at work or at home, anywhere that we show up, we carry that kind of strength with us. And so every time we step up, every time we handle a situation, every time we say yes to another opportunity to serve, all of those things get reinforced. And you hear these wonderful accolades like, thank goodness for you. We couldn't do this without you. We value you. You're a great team player. And look, those words feel good. And when we're asked to take on more responsibility, we tell ourselves that, this is what we're working hard for. When we get tapped on the shoulder for another board position or to join a committee or to lead something, it feels good because it's an outward sign that what we're doing is being valued. And the challenge, though, comes in as we keep taking on more and more and more, and we struggle with the weight of that, but we also struggle with who are we becoming in the process? Because what I believe happens for a lot of us is that who we were in the beginning of our career that helped us get where we are may not be the same person that we want to be today, and may not be the same person who can take us forward. And so I think as these things quietly build and our identity starts to take on new forms and new shapes, when we start to see that carrying more, even if we don't really understand it or realize it on a surface level, underneath we realize that as we carry more, we start to measure our self-worth based on whether we're having a good day at work or not. And if we're getting results, we feel successful. And when we're not hitting our goals or getting results, then the dialogue changes. And so I think that when we start to look at the world outside of us as a way to validate who we are and our worth, then that becomes a real challenge. And we start to struggle with our identity, and we start drifting further away from who we are. And when that happens and expectations start to pile up, and we're living up to all the expectations of the environment around us, the people around us for such a long time, then we start to really question in those moments of stress and anxiety, who are we actually? And, again, this is gradual. This is something that happens over time. It's subtle, but it can also be very disorienting when you start to understand it and become aware of it. It was for me. Look, I understand that not everyone listening to this can quite grasp it, because you may or may not be in that position. You may not relate to some things I'm talking about, or maybe you're just not there yet in terms of awareness. But I will tell you that there are more of us struggling with this than we want to admit. And I think there are more of us who can look very successful on paper, and we look really successful on the outside, and yet we can feel increasingly disconnected on the inside. And if that is you, if I'm connecting with you, if I'm speaking with you, I just want to say to you, I see you, and I understand, and I get it. And And there's strength in having this conversation, which is why I wanted to really put it out here on the podcast and why I wrote this book. And here's where I want to get even more specific with you, because I think this is where most conversations about burnout and exhaustion might miss the mark. I think we tend to think, as I said, that we're tired because of everything we're doing. And yes, many of us are doing a lot, but I really believe it's not the tasks themselves that are making us feel this exhaustion. I think that the work that we're doing is rarely what makes us feel like it could break us. I think what exhausts us most is the emotional weight underneath the task. It's that constant low grade monitoring. It's checking to make sure that you are getting it done. It's telling yourself you don't have enough hours in the day. It's that invisible checklist you keep in your mind that never fully clears out. It's that quiet, persistent sense that something still needs your attention even when you're sitting still. It's thinking about how you've sat down to rest and found that your mind just won't stop running. And you're playing back the meeting you had earlier, you're reviewing the conversations you've had during the day, you're previewing everything that needs to happen tomorrow, and you're constantly thinking about what you haven't accomplished. And your body is taking score. Your body's feeling it, and you're mentally hauling all of this with you. And that's what's really making you feel exhausted. You could sleep for the next 10 hours and wake up and still feel that kind of pressure. And I think that weight that comes from feeling like you have to be the one to do it all, the strong one, the leader, look, I just had a conversation with someone yesterday. She's an executive assistant to the president of a large company. And this is exactly the conversation we were having. And she's convincing herself that she has to take on more because she has to support the CEO. And while I understand that her role is a support role, where is the conversation with these two individuals, both who happen to be women, where they're trying to perform at such a high level that they're not even prioritizing what needs to be done? They're constantly reacting rather than responding. And they're both feeling the exhaustion, and they're both feeling like they can't have the conversation. And that's really the challenge here, is when you start to feel like there's no other way but the way that you're doing it. And I think there's always another way. And if you're listening to this right now and you're nodding your head, I get it. And I get that you probably are that person, whether you're in leadership or not. You're the one that people call. You're the woman who gets it done. You're the person that everyone turns to for advice. You're the one that fixes things. You're the one that has to get things back on track. And you continue to do that at such a high level that no one even notices when you're off, because they just assume that, you can get it done and that you're always going to be able to do it. And they don't even realize when you're feeling like your cup is overflowing. And so they assume you're fine because you make sure that you always look fine. You are the strong one after all, right? So you're the one that others have come to understand they can lean on. And so you're not going to share your private struggle. You're not going to open up about why you're feeling overwhelmed because that's too scary. And I get it. And that is a lonely experience. It's probably one of the loneliest experiences I've ever come to know, because I went through it too. And I would rather have probably chopped off my right arm than to admit that I was struggling. Because for me, and I'm just going to be very transparent, for me, I felt like it was a moment of weakness. If I was going to be clear and open about how I was feeling overwhelmed, I didn't want someone to look at me and think I couldn't do the work, that I was no longer capable, that I had lost my edge. But here's the truth, everyone. What I have come to learn through my own experiences, what I knew I had to come back to as a professional, highly educated and certified coach. But at the end of the day, none of that matters when you're the one in it, right? Because you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. What I had to come to learn and experience for myself was this understanding and acceptance that this was not weakness. It was not weakness at all. It was the cost of an identity that was never meant to be permanent. And what do I mean by that? It means, look, I grew up in business at a time when the hustle and grind culture was the way it was. And I started very young. I was 18 when I started in a very male dominated world in a pharmaceutical company where there was a lot of pressure to perform. And I rose to the occasion. And I learned very quickly that if I could meet or exceed my goals, then I would get recognition. And that recognition was validating. And that recognition meant that I was doing a good job. So I continued that. And so I saw how if I outperformed, I received and reaped the rewards of that, whether it was promotions, new opportunities, financial rewards, bonuses, even trips. I did it. And so I learned that performance was key. And I have no regrets because it helped me build a career. But here's where I'm at today, 35 years later. I want more. I want to contribute in a different way at a higher level. And I want to do it in alignment with who I am. I want to do it in alignment with my values. And what got me here is just not the same thing that is going to allow me to continue. And I'm just curious how many of you can relate to that, because I think many high achieving women have unknowingly turned their lives into a performance review. Every day becomes a new evaluation. Am I doing enough? Am I producing enough? Can I go far enough? Am I meeting expectations? Not just of others, but you're doing this internally with the version of yourself that you feel you're supposed to be. I told you we were going to have an honest conversation. And so I'm wondering how many of you can relate to this, and how many of you can relate to the sense of, well, what happens when your sense of self becomes organized around your results. A good day feels like validation and a hard day feels like failure. And neither one of those things is actually true. It's just that you had a hard day. But when that's the operating system running in the background, the thing is your nervous system never fully powers down. You are evaluating yourself even when you're resting. You're asking yourself if you're winning. You're looking at what's going well and you're ruminating on the things that didn't go well. And that level of constant self-monitoring is quietly, relentlessly exhausting. And this is what I mean when I say exhaustion isn't just physical. It runs much deeper than that. It is the fatigue of performing a version of yourself day after day without ever fully stopping to ask if that version is still working for you. So what is it that I want you to hear today? I want you to start to hear the real reason why you might be tired. And I also want you to hear that whatever it is probably temporary, as it was for me. And that I want to give you a way to release the steam valve a little bit. Because if you're carrying a lot, or you're carrying things that you were never meant to carry, and I mean, when I say that, I mean like the expectations you inherited, the standards you might have outgrown years ago, but never gave yourself permission to release them. Maybe you're holding on to a definition of success that someone else wrote that you've been quietly maintaining for so long. Here's what I want you to know. That none of that, if any of it is true, none of it is a personal failure. It's just that now you have awareness. I'm giving you an opportunity to see it in a different light. And I want you to know that this is happening to more people than we realize. This is what happens when capable women care deeply and no one teaches them that you are also allowed to set some things down. And I think that if you take one thing away from this conversation today, it's this. Whatever you might be feeling doesn't necessarily mean that you're broken in any way. Your system isn't failing you. It's communicating with you. Your body is trying to get your attention. So if you're feeling that pit in your stomach, if you're feeling that low-level anxiety, if you're having any kind of reaction, it's your body trying to talk to you. It's giving you information. And what feels like exhaustion is a boundary asking for your attention. I'm going to say that again. What feels like exhaustion is likely a boundary asking for your attention. And what feels like disconnection is an invitation to just come back to yourself. And if you've been missing some of the signs, it's not because you're careless. You've missed them because you were probably capable. And because you're so capable, you've trained yourself to just keep moving forward. And that's why you missed something along the way. But again, there comes a point where moving forward might not always be the answer. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do as a leader, as a woman, is to pause, is to take a time out and ask some questions. And probably different questions, right? Because the question I want you to ask yourself is not how I can do more, or how I can manage it better, or how I can manage my time better. That's not the question. The question is not, how do I push through this? The questions have to be, I think, different around really the clarity that you need to have around what are you carrying that you might just need to be ready to put down? What are you holding on to that no longer serves you? What expectations have you held on to or received that just no longer fits who you're becoming? What responsibilities did you pick up that maybe were never yours to grab in the first place? And the most important question you could ask yourself is this: what version of success feels right for who I am today? If you could sit with those questions this week, and we can put them in the show notes for you, I want you to really give yourself some space to answer them. And look, it's not because you're going to solve everything by sitting down with these 3 or 4 questions. I just want you to notice what comes up. I want you to notice the honesty that you can get into with yourself and what that could start to reveal to you. And I'll leave you with this. You are not meant to operate like a machine. You're not here to prove your worth through exhaustion. And rest is not something you earn after you've completely depleted yourself. It's something that you have to claim along the way as part of how you lead. You can't give to others if you're constantly depleting yourself. The strongest women I know are not the women who can carry everything. They are the women who know what is theirs to carry, and they have the clarity and the courage to put the rest down. If today's conversation stirred something in you, as I told you, I wrote an entire book about this process, about what I lived through, but more importantly, how I worked through it and came out the other side stronger, clearer, and more in alignment with who I want to be in this world than I ever could have imagined. My new book, Getting Back to You, is not really a self-help book either. It's not about fixing yourself. It's honestly a conversation about coming back to who you are, coming home and realigning with who you are at your core. And I didn't write the book because I had all the answers. I wrote it because I finally slowed down enough and long enough to ask better questions. And if you would like to get a copy, it would be my honor for you to read it. I believe it will change you. You'll find the link in the show notes. You can also visit gettingbacktoyoubook.com and make sure that you sign up for the pre-sale when we kick it off. And if this episode resonated with you, I want you to share it with another woman that you know is carrying a lot. I want you to play this back as often as you need to. And until next time, keep growing, keep supporting yourself, and give yourself some grace and permission to put something down this week. Thanks for being here.